Because right now I'm like, I can't see you. All right, we're coming up
Okay.
right now. Hey, Bernadette, hey, Robert, we're coming up in five, four, three, two. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. You know, I've got one of my favorite people here with me, Greg Palast. Yay! The crusading Greg Palast, the award winning journalist, the New York Times best-selling author, the best democracy money can buy. Oh my gosh, Vigilantes Inc. Oh, there's just so much that he has done. And indeed, hey, he came to my attention many, many years ago, but I tell you, he really became like one of my personal heroes when he uncovered the theft of the 2000 election. I couldn't find his work anywhere in the United States initially. I had to go over to England first and find out once I knew there was something that was happening and to ultimately see that, Al Gore did win that election. He did. He did. And so we need to understand voter suppression and voter theft is real. It's real. And he absolutely helped us to see that, not just in that election, but in 2004. I don't know what happened in 2008 and 2012. And it seems like we've not been talking about voter suppression since the Obama election. And heaven knows, voter suppression is very real. And he was sounding the alarm in 2016 and 2020 and 24. And many of us said, well, I think Kamala's going to be okay. And you kept saying, no, these people have a plan to steal these elections. You need to understand that they are very serious about having power, about controlling these elections. Well, many of us, although we were brokenhearted about the 2024 election, we accepted the results and kind of went on. Okay. Some of us said, well, we won't look at the inauguration. We'll find some ways to protest. But we lost, and we'll just better luck the next time. And in comes Greg Palast. He said, not so fast. Trump won. Voter suppression won, actually. And Trump actually lost. While he's talking about this mandate that he has, even the mandate is really not a mandate because it is, according to the official results, he won a mandate in the Electoral College, but not in the vote count. He got 49.8% of the vote. She got 48.6% of the vote. But Greg says, not so fast. Like 3 million plus votes out there that she should have gotten. Got to talk about that. I want you to go to Blue Sky. That's where Santita Jackson is. SantitaJackson.bsky.social, at Santita J on X. And I am on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook. But I want you to go to gregpalace.com. I'm going to send this link to you so you can post it on your website. And everyone, please watch Vigilantes Inc. It will help. This won't look so crazy to you. But I was very, very privileged to get something that I've been passing around to my friends. And it was a draft and it was embargoed, but I'm glad you trusted me enough to let me have this. Trump lost, voter suppression won. Here are the numbers. This is by Greg Palast. And you just have to understand Trump lost, you stated at the beginning. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Let me say this again. You state affirmatively at the beginning Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots had been counted, he would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. These swing states, everyone has taken it as an article of faith that Kamala Harris was creamed in this election. And what you're saying is no. You said Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes.
Yes.
Okay, maybe it's the popular vote. You're like, no. All of these votes that were not counted, people were not allowed to vote. All of these factors would have not only swung the popular vote, but where it really counts in this country, it would have swung the electoral college. So, what are you saying here?
Okay. So Santita, if by the way, if people don't know who I am, Greg Palast, you can tell by my hat that I'm an investigative reporter for the Guardian and BBC Television and Rolling Stone. But before I was a investigative reporter, I was what was called a forensic economist, a detective who's good with numbers. And I worked for dozens of U.S. attorneys general and the United States Justice Department. What I do is I analyze statistics. In fact, I was a professor of statistics at Indiana University. I got my degree doing this work at where your dad went, University of Chicago. I worked under Milton Friedman. And so this is my specialty. And my awards are in data journalism. This is what I do. I do numbers. And there's no question, zero, none, that if not for Jim Crow vote suppression, and it's very important that you understand that it's racial. If we're not for Jim Crow vote suppression, Kamala Harris would have been elected president. She would have had 3,565,000 more votes. She'd have beat Trump by 1.2 million. I'm going to throw some numbers at you very quickly. And if anyone wants to really get these numbers, don't take out a pen and a calculator. Just go to gregpalast.com, GREGPALAST, and you'll see my story. Trump lost, vote suppression won. Here are the numbers. Yes, and Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia would have gone to Kamala Harris if not for these Jim Crow vote suppression tactics. Let's begin with this. And understand, I'm a statistician, and I work almost exclusively from U.S. government statistics. We have an agency called the Elections Assistance Commission, and their job, God knows what will happen under Trump, but their job is not only to track how what votes were cast and counted, but what votes were not counted.
Now,
And this is really important.
What is this again?
United States Elections Assistance Commission. So they issued a report, which no one seemed to notice, that before the 2024 election, 4,776,706 voters, just short of 5 million voters, were purged, that is, wiped off the voter rolls. And then we had 317,886 voters who were challenged by self-proclaimed vigilante voter challengers. We'll go through that. 2.12 million, so over 2 million mail-in ballots were disqualified. 585,000 ballots were spoiled. What they mean by that is not counted, unreadable. Provisional ballots, 1,216,000 provisional ballots were disqualified. And this is the result of, according to the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law School, 30 states passed laws making it very, very difficult for people to vote, particularly people of color. Now, let me break it down a bit. We talk about mail-in ballots. Now, most African Americans vote early by mail-in ballots or drop box. And so Trump went on the attack against the way that Democrats and voters of color vote. The chance you vote by mail is 51% higher if you're Democratic. So what do we mean by 2 million ballots are disqualified? According to NPR, by the way, of all places, they found that 1 in 7 million mail-in ballots are disqualified. You write, if you registered with a middle initial and you didn't include the middle initial on your return address, out goes your ballot. If you have if you put an X or a check next to a candidate instead of filling in a bubble, out goes your ballot. So all these Republican operatives in particular spend a lot of time going through your mail-in ballots and saying, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. And it's not small. We're talking, again, this is the official figures, 1.2 million mail-in ballots. Now, if it were anyone's ballot, If it were random, who cares if 2 million ballots are thrown out? It would still not change the election. But here's the numbers you should look at. If you are, according to the Washington State, which analyzed its mail-in ballots, they found that if you are black, the chance that your ballot will be disqualified is 400% higher if you're black than if you're white. Now, that's not Greg Palast talking. That's the state of Washington elections officials.
Say that one more time, please.
Okay, so state of Washington election officials looked at whose ballots, mail-in ballots, were disqualified. Again, about 1 in 7. It's 400% more likely you will lose your ballot if you're black. You'll have your mail-in ballot disqualified if you're black than if you're white.
Why?
Now, like I say, everything because they're looking for your ballots to disqualify them. They're looking that you missed that middle initial. You looked that you used that you didn't use a black or blue pen. They're looking if you put an X instead of a fill in a bubble on the mail-in ballot. All these gotcha things that the GOP operatives are looking for, bang, your ballot goes. Now, here's the other thing. I talked about spoiled ballots, even in precinct when you go to vote. And again, this government figures 585,000 ballots disqualified. Whose ballots? The United States Civil Rights Commission did an analysis of ballots rejected, like disqualified. You actually vote, but then they say, oh, your vote was disqualified because there's a mismark on your ballot. There's a problem. The chance your ballot will be rejected is 900% higher if you're black than if you're white. Let me repeat that. The chance your ballot will be disqualified is 9 times higher if you're black than if you're white. Provisional ballots. Now, what are provisional ballots? This crazy business that if you go in and they say, oh, your ballot has been, your name is not on the voter rolls. Someone's challenged you. There's a purge, whatever. We can't find your name. Don't worry. Fill out, the little old lady behind the desk is very nice. She doesn't know this. She hands you a paper ballot to fill out and an envelope to stick it in. She says, this is a provisional ballot, and they'll check your registration, and then your vote will count. No, that's not true. She doesn't know this, but according, again, to the United States Elections Assistance Commission, the official keeper of the stats, 43%, almost half of those ballots, provisional ballots, are thrown in the garbage. And again, if it's random, who cares? Because then statistically it wouldn't change an election. However, if you're black, Hispanic, or Asian American, the chance you will be handed a provisional ballot, I call them placebo ballots because they make you think you voted, but you haven't. If you're black, Hispanic, or Asian American, the chance you will be handed a provisional ballot is 300% higher than if you are white. And again, almost half of these ballots are thrown in the garbage. Then we get to one of the most evil things. This is brand new for 2024. Are the vigilante challenges. Now, what are vigilante challenges? Back in 1946, Santita, the Ku Klux Klan launched a program to challenge every black voter in Georgia. And they were pretty successful in challenging most black voters, resulting in the Klan leader, Eugene Talmadge, being elected governor of Georgia. Now, that hasn't been done since 1946 because the FBI, that's a violation of the 15th Amendment, and the FBI was about to arrest Governor Talmadge of the Klan for systematically blocking black votes. But he drank himself to death before they handcuffed him. So he took himself out. But here's the weird thing. That was 1946. We are now in 2024, and the Trump campaign resurrected the Ku Klux Klan plan. They first took it for a test drive in 2020 in Georgia, including, as I've talked to you about before, if you go to gregpalast.com and you see the article, Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won, you'll see the picture of Major Gamaliel Turner, African-American career military. He was 70 years old in 2020, and he was told, he said he was assigned from Fort Benning, Georgia, to a base in California. and he didn't get his absentee ballot. So he called the county. He said, "Where's my ballot?" And they said, "Mr. Turner, you've been challenged. We can't send you a ballot." He said, "What does that mean?" He said, "They said, no problem. Just come in to our office, prove you're a citizen." This is a U.S. career military officer. Just prove you're a citizen. You live in Georgia. He said, "You're telling me 2 days before an election to fly into Georgia,
From
2,700 miles,
thank you
2,700 miles
across country.
to prove I'm an American citizen again to get my vote." Just so you know, Major Turner did fly 5,000 miles round trip ultimately to get his vote counted. But the guy who challenged him, and again, this is not government. These are GOP operatives, self-appointed. And by the way, I'm not picking on the Republican Party. 100% of these challengers were GOP officials, were Republican officials. And the guy who challenged him challenged 4,000 other voters, almost all of them black soldiers out of the Fort Benning area, out of Fort Benning. Challenged soldiers, their right to vote. He got his vote back because he went to federal court to get his vote back, federal court. But the other 4,000, well, again, a lot of them black soldiers, were denied their right to vote. And so because of the success of this vigilante attack, this front group, Trump-supported front group called True the Vote out of Texas, signed up, are you ready for this? 40,000 vigilantes to go challenge people, because in dozens of states, you still have these old Jim Crow laws on the books that say that an individual, I can say, Santita Jackson does not live in Chicago, don't let her vote. Now, who am I to say Santita Jackson shouldn't vote? Well, I got to tell you, these old Jim Crow laws are still on the books in Georgia and Mississippi and Iowa, and believe it or not, in Philadelphia and Michigan and Wisconsin, all throughout America. You have these Jim Crow laws which allow individuals to block you from voting. And this, again, has not been used since 1946 when the Klan did this. But by August, this one group proudly announced that they had challenged the votes of 317,886 voters. That's 1/3 of a million voters by August. Their plan was to challenge up to 2 million by election day. The states have been stonewalling me on how many of these challenges went through. Gerald Griggs, president of the NAACP of Georgia, who's, by the way, my attorney, Gerald Griggs said that it looked like they were getting 200,000 challenges to voters by election day in November in just Georgia alone.
In 2024.
2024. So
wait, stop, Greg.
Yeah.
With all of these challenges, why have we not heard about this?
There was a little story in the New York Times, but they didn't give you the numbers. And of course, here's one of the problems I have with mainstream press in America.
Greg, stop.
Yeah.
Because all I've been hearing is that President Trump got a mandate. I mean, for the anchors who clearly are at odds with him politically. And I'm not asking you to do that. I don't care about your opinion. I want you to report the story. I'll make up my own mind. What? And report the story, which means you actually investigate. When you've got all of these votes out here, I have not heard anything in legacy media and corporate media about vote challenges. I've not heard anything about this.
Well,
let alone hundreds of thousands and millions of them. I've not heard anything about it.
Well, here's one of the problems I have with my colleagues. Now, again, I am mainstream. That is, I work with BBC television, with The Guardian. These are the big English language outlets worldwide, but not in America. And my problem with my fellow Americans.
Globally, they are. Yeah.
My fellow Americans, journalists, they will talk about vote suppression tactics. In fact, these vigilante challenges, there was a story in the New York Times before the election. There's stories, again, NPR did this story about 1 in 7 Democratic ballots being disqualified that are mailed in, and the majority of Democrats vote by mail or vote early. And 1 in 7 are disqualified. So they talk about these things before an election, but never, ever, ever, ever do they say, oh, remember that story we wrote about mail-in ballots not being counted? Remember the story about the vigilante vote challenges by these self-proclaimed vigilantes? Remember those stories? Remember the stories we did about the big purges of the voter rolls? Here's how they affected the election. They never, ever, ever say this overturned election. So let me ask you a question to my fellow journalists. If you're writing stories about not counting mail-in ballots, challenging voters, purging voters by literally the millions, why don't you do a story on how it overturned the election? They never say that because Biden and other Democrats and the mainstream media have said Biden said anyone who challenges the results of American elections is undermining democracy. No, to me, the guys who are doing the Jim Crow vote purging, challenging, destroying your ballots, not counting them. Those are the people who are against democracy, not those of us who report the story. It's like saying when a cop arrests a bank robber, it's the cop's fault for reporting the bank robbery. But I guess under the new Trump administration, when criminals are given, pardons and exoneration, I guess that's the new wave. But what it shocks me is that the so-called liberal press is not, and the Democratic Party has not said a damn thing about what happened to voters of color in this past election. And to me, that is the threat to democracy, not calling this stuff out. And again, look, this is not Greg Palast stuff. I'm not talking about Elon Musk, changing the vote totals from outer space. I'm talking about numbers I get from the United States government on the votes that are not counted and the racial and the violently racial bias in that non-count of votes. And if Kamala Harris had gotten those votes, if they didn't disqualify those ballots, if they didn't purge people and stop them from voting, she would have won Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. And she would have won by 286 electoral votes, and she'd have beaten Trump's popular vote by 1.2 million.
See, you know what, Robert Williams, I'm hearing you. You said I'm not going to call any one president that screwed me out of my vote. But you know what? You need to call the Democrats on the carpet, because I saw them do this in 2000. I saw them do this in 2004. They have always dropped the ball on this. No, Greg, because I had to search high and low to find your reportage about the 2000 election. And then when I found it, it was like, I've got Al Gore conceding and saying, no, that's all right. It's okay. No, it's not okay.
It's not okay. You know why? Because it's not his votes. These are the votes of, like in the case of Florida, for those who've read my reporting, again, this is Greg Palast. If those who've read my reporting know that when I was at BBC and The Guardian, I did a story in 2000 that, remember, George Bush only became president of the United States by just 537 votes in Florida. That's what it came down to, 500 votes in Florida. But what I discovered is that 58,000 black men were removed from the voter rolls because they were supposedly felons, ex-cons who couldn't vote. Their only crime was voting while black. I went to the Attorney General of Florida and said, well, if these people have committed this, if someone voted illegally, a felon voter, if they voted illegally, would you arrest them? He said, of course. I said, well, here you are, Jeb Bush, George Bush's brother, and Catherine Harris, then the Secretary of State, said, here's 58,000 black guys who are ex-cons who shouldn't be allowed to vote. I said, how many of you arrested? He said, it's all bogus. And this is a Republican. He said, it's bogus. And he said, we looked at 6 cases. It came down to just 6 cases. Not even those 6 cases were meaningless. So what I'm saying is these tactics have been used before. Al Gore was informed of this. He was given my Guardian article, and he just would not act on it because it's not his votes. Remember that in the end, there's one party, Hezbollah Shekel, the party of the money, and the party of the incumbents. And in America, I mean, I could put this stuff in the Guardian. I could put this stuff all over. my stuff was, just so you know, it wasn't just hidden. This is front page of the newspapers all over the world, except the U.S. This is the top of the nightly news.
I read it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find out. Well, I want you to continue to go through the numbers here, because wait a minute. You have got DEI that has been ended. DEIA, it's been ended. You have got all programs where they're dispensing of the money. That's been shut down as of today. Elections have consequences, everybody. And when I'm looking at the media, they're so busy making it personal about Trump. This to me is, it's not even about him. This is about process. Because you can talk about the Republicans all day long. I want to know how it is that the Democrats wag their fingers in my faces, particularly black folks, and tell me you have no choice but to vote for me. But when I vote for you, you don't fight for me. That is not working for me. And I'm on my way to Washington to help give a nominating speech for Dr. James Zogby, who has almost been like a voice in the wilderness, for the unvoiced. But there is no, and they have tried to make Kamala Harris, our former Vice President Harris, they've tried to make her a pariah. Oh, she lost. Biden continues to say, oh, I would have won. No, first of all, no, you would not have. And actually now we're seeing with your numbers that she did win. She did.
She won.
What?
Except for Jim Crow. And I don't use that. I don't throw around things like Jim Crow and racism and stolen elections. I don't do that lightly. Understand.
Why don't you tell me why you talk about racism?
Okay, because I'm a statistician. Just so you know. Again, I got my degree in University of Chicago. Did my doctoral
one of
work.
the top economic schools in the world. In fact, they shape economic policy, quite frankly, for America and the Western world.
Yeah, that's not always for good, but I got, but I was an expert. I worked for the U.S. Justice Department for like 20, the Attorney General of Illinois and dozens of others attorneys general and then around the world. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a detective that works with numbers. They call it a forensic economist. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking at the stats, and the stats are racial. We can't just pretend that race isn't the core of this. So, like, for example, when I said you have 2.1 million mail-in ballots rejected, but you're 900% more likely to get your ballot rejected if you're black than if you're white. So whose votes are in that dumpster? Provisional ballots, if you're 300% more likely to be handed one of these ballots that they don't count, again, almost half of them are not counted, 43% are not counted. Again, it's voters of color. We can't, and then when I looked at the voters who were challenged, 250,000 by August, when I looked at those thousands of voters challenged by Republican operatives, again, these are not government officials. We called 800. For those statisticians know that's a very huge sample. We called 800 of these voters, overwhelmingly black voters, some young people too, who are voters of color, that is the color blue. But you're talking about the 800 people we called, almost all of them are black voters who had their votes challenged. A lot of them didn't even know that their votes were challenged. Purge voters. Okay, I took for the ACLU of Georgia and for the NAACP and Black Voters Matter Fund, I did two things. I looked at the purge list. Now, what is a purge? You just literally wipe people off the voter rolls. You say that they don't live at their voting address anymore. Mm-hmm. I looked through two states' purge lists, Georgia and Wisconsin, two of the swing states in the last election. And when I looked at them, I hired, just so you know, the experts who work with Amazon and Microsoft and American Express, and their job is to verify where you live. There's a lot of Jesse Jacksons in America, and they don't get the wrong tidy whities. Amazon knows exactly where you live. They don't miss. That's why they rarely misdirect a delivery, because they check it. So what we did was we hired the Amazon people to check the address list name by name by name. And we found, for example, in Georgia, that 198,000 people that were removed from the voter rolls for supposedly leaving Georgia were still at their legal voting address, overwhelmingly, again, Black people. Now, that was 198,000 people wrongly removed from the voter rolls. And I want to bring out this point. It's not just numbers, Santita. I was at those polling stations where I was watching one African-American voter after another being thrown out. You can't vote here anymore, including a 92-year-old woman in a walker. Her granddaughter was hysterical. And you'll see this on camera. I have a film that you can download. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this was a 92-year-old woman in a walker. They said she didn't live in Atlanta anymore. I went down the street to her home where they said she didn't live. There on the wall was a picture of her at the same house 50 years earlier with Martin Luther King at her dinner table. I said, "You knew King?" She said, "He was my cousin. He came here after services every Sunday." So they removed Martin Luther King's cousin from the voter rolls. She'd been voting at the same place for 50 years, and they said she didn't live there anymore. So I want you to put the names to the numbers and the faces to the numbers, just like Major General Gamaliel Turner. Now, Turner, again, was one of 1/3 people whose vote was challenged, overwhelmingly African Americans. But you have to understand, this guy literally flew 5,000 miles to get his vote counted because his father, Harold Turner, co-founded Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Ralph Abernathy and Martin Luther King. So you want to meet these people. Now, if you want to see these people, not only get the numbers, but meet the people, you can go and watch my film, which, Santita, you've seen a few times, called Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen. By the way, it's narrated by the wonderful Rosario Dawson, produced by the wonderful Martin Sheen, my favorite president, President
Our
Hamlet.
friend.
Yes, Martin
Our
Sheen.
dear friend.
And you can you can stream that for free. Thank you, Jamie Foxx and Leonardo DiCaprio, for making that possible at gregpalast.com. Look at my name, gregpalast.com, GregPalast. And you can stream that for free. And you can meet these people. But here are the numbers. Kamala Harris, except for Jim Crow, would have won. And this is what I do for a living. Now, you understand that I can't mess with these numbers because with the NAACP and Black Voters Matter Fund, I went into federal court and under oath. You don't mess around there. And this is what I do for a living. I testify as an expert witness in federal courts in the U.S. And these are the numbers I'm presenting in federal court. This is no joke. I'm an expert in this, and I usually don't talk about my expertise, but it's important for you to understand that I'm a certified expert in this field of statistics and presenting this material in federal courts. You have to understand that this massive non-count of votes. Now, I report all over the world. I've covered elections not only in the U.S., but Mexico, Liberia, Venezuela, Switzerland, England, all over the world. And there's no other democratic country that considers itself democratic or that we recognize. I'm not talking about Russia, China, or Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about democratic countries. Not one does this system where you purge vote, where you say you can't vote, where they say, oh, your ballot doesn't count. That doesn't happen in other nations. And we're not talking a few votes. We're talking millions. Again, Kamala Harris would have won this election, except for these Jim Crow tactics, by 3,565,000 in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. And this is what's going on. And they use every trick in the world, according to the Brennan Center for Justice out of NYU Law School.
And by 286 electoral.
Yeah. College votes, easy.
But the reason this is so important, Greg, number one, the Democrats have been negligent in not touching this. Shame on them. Shame on because we don't have a press. We have media. They're entertainers. They're not serious. They're not.
Yeah.
And then they have absolutely talk about an attack upon democracy. That's what this is. That's what this is. well, when you listen, you know me, I listen to C-SPAN, you know I do, first thing in the
Yeah,
morning. And I
sure.
love listening to Washington Journal because I love listening to the Republicans, the Independents, and the Democrats, and hearing from people what their thoughts are. I don't have to agree with you, but I like hearing how Americans are thinking. America is so sharply divided, Greg. Americans do not trust the system, Greg. Greg, this is socially unsustainable.
Well, there's
People know how
Mhm.
they voted, and I was hearing from people, you know what? I believe Kamala won. Something didn't happen. Something wasn't right here. And what you're telling me is in these four key states, these four key states, four: Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Wait a minute. I keep hearing about this mandate that President Trump got. What you're telling me, you're giving lie to all of that. You're like, no, it wasn't a mandate. And what they said they were going to do, they said they were going to, the Republicans said, I'm going to put 50,000 people to watch all y'all vote in all of the states and territories.
And they did it. And no one's talking about it. They have under
That's
these
what I'm trying
old
to
Jim
say.
people don't even realize that we have these old Jim Crow laws on the books where you can
Oh,
challenge them. Like I say, I can say Santita Jackson doesn't live in Chicago. Don't counter vote. And it's hard for people to wrap their head around it, but this is for real. Like I said, there was a little story in the Times, but they didn't talk about how many, which is over 1 million challenges. They didn't talk about how many challenges, and they didn't talk about, and they never ever say this affected the election. So why did 30, according to Brennan Center, why did 30 states between 2020 and this election 2024, why did 30 red states pass laws that made it harder for people of color to vote? You think that didn't have an effect? 30 states passing new laws? Well, let me give you an example of one. In Georgia, the swing state of swing states, in Georgia, the vast majority of African American voters and urban voters out of Atlanta voted through mail-in ballots, mostly drop boxes and early voting. So what they did is they cut early voting from 60 days to 9. And that's
from
your
2 months,
Democratic vote.
from
The
two
other
months
thing,
to 9 days.
yes. So then they also, by law, SB 202, signed by Governor Brian Kemp, who's supposed to be a great progressive. No, he isn't. He's a right-wing, vicious, racist Republican.
When
And
did
I
he
don't throw
get
around the term
progressive?
racist very easily. But what he did was, and here's why it is racist. One of the things he did in SB 202 that he signed, he reduced the number of ballot boxes in the Atlanta counties and Savannah, the two big black cities. He reduced the number of drop boxes by 75% and also prohibited you, put them inside buildings so you couldn't vote at night. The number of people using ballot drop boxes dropped by 90%. And again, that's the method of voting preferred by African Americans in Georgia's cities. They literally cut the number of your ability to drop off your ballot by 90%, while at the same time in the law, they required white counties, and I can't make this up. They required white counties. They call them white counties, but they know what they're doing. They required white counties to increase the number of ballot boxes. This is a type of trickery and games. And then the mass purges, the crazy mass purges, like we had in Wisconsin. I did a study, a technical study for Black Voters Matter Fund, Latasha Brown, and for Wisconsin. They had a purge list. And by the way, with the Washington Post, we mapped the purges, and almost every purge voter was in a black precinct in Milwaukee, except for a few precincts which were student precincts at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, very liberal, and a lot of foreign students, foreign American students whose parents were born abroad. And so you see, so in Wisconsin, you had this racist purge operation. They removed over 150,000 people from the voter rolls. And we proved, again, I'm not guessing that these people were wrongly targeted because I used Amazon's people to go use their computers, go name by name by name by name, and we could say this person is not moved. Why are you removing them from the voter rolls? The answer is what they play this trick called what I call the poison postcard. They send out postcards to people that they're targeting. And if you don't return the postcard, you lose your vote because they say, oh, you don't live there anymore. Well, it looks like junk mail. Who responds to junk mail? And especially like students, like my son picks up his mail when he was in school by, once a semester. And then black people in Milwaukee, they may not notice this stuff. Who people throw this away. In fact, in Georgia, 99% of the people mailed these poison postcards did not return them because it just looks like junk mail. Why should you respond? And this flipped Georgia. This flipped Wisconsin. Michigan, you had these massive purges. You had these challenges. In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump's lawyer, Cleta Mitchell, created a group called Eagle AI, or Eagle Eye, as she called it. Now, this is a repeat of the 1964 group called Eagle Eye, which was ruled illegal by the courts, in which the Republicans were challenging Mexican Americans voting in Arizona. So they've now brought this back, Eagle AI, and they're using artificial intelligence to target voters. They targeted tens of thousands of voters in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania also removed almost 500,000 voters before the election. So mainly in Philadelphia, and so once again, it's, if it were random, if they're just removing voters or challenging voters randomly, they don't. It is racial, and that's very, very important to know, because they know. Look, even though there was a bit of shift in the African American vote, they know pretty much if you're African American, you're voting blue. They know that. So if they can knock off voters of color, poor people, and Asian Americans now, they know that they're knocking off Democratic voters. And this is the game that's being played. We're not dealing with Jim Crow. And you're asking about the Democratic Party. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they did. I will say one thing for Kamala Harris. She did hire Mark Elias, a decent attorney working on vote suppression, but we didn't get enough of the action I was hoping. Look, I went into federal court with the NAACP, Black Voters Matter, and of course, Rainbow Push, the great C.K. Hoffler, a wonderful attorney who represents Reverend Jackson. And but we were in federal court. I was testifying as a witness with all these numbers. Where was the Democratic Party?
I mean, still following Joe Biden, who still is saying today that he could have beaten Trump. She had to run with his people who did not like her. The people who staffed her campaign, who ran her campaign, were his people. They didn't like her. They wouldn't let her switch messages, even just an iota, just a little. And even with that, she won. And these are the same people who would clearly not let her proceed with challenges to save our votes. I repeat, Greg, how is it that you come and you wag your finger in my face and you tell me if I don't vote for you, if I don't vote for her, then I've got a problem. I'm sexist. I'm this. Now, okay, that didn't happen to white men who did not vote for her. They didn't do that to white women. They did not vote for her. Not the majority. She got 10 toes down. Black men, black women. Yeah, 80+% of black men voted for her. Asians voted for her. Latino men did not. Latinas did. Look, and then you're telling me that I've got more than 3.5 million votes out here that they didn't even fight for. And now look at what I've got.
It's the same thing. I've been doing this. Yeah, I've been doing this.
You've got to be sick of this.
I am. I'm gonna be honest. I'm getting I'm exhausted with it because in 2000,
you can't get tired. You can't get tired.
In 2000, when I uncovered that all these black men were removed from the voter rolls of Florida, and that's what elected George Bush, I thought once I exposed that game would end. In fact, it accelerated, and and part of the reason it accelerates, while the Democratic Party will often say, "Oh yeah, there's vote suppression," but when the election's over, they never bring it up again. I say, well, you kept talking about vote suppression. So what was the effect of vote suppression? In fact, what's unusual, what kind of shocked me, it's been a couple months since the election, of course. And so you have to ask, why, Greg, did you take so long? Well, I took the data, but I was waiting also for my colleagues in American journalism to do some of the calculations and say, well, we did all these stories on vote suppression. Well, what was the effect? So now I'm a specialist in this, that as I work with the numbers, but my God, we should have had the American press, the Democratic Party saying, well, here are the effects. So I simply went you have to understand, all I'm doing is going into government databases and working with the government database numbers. It's not like something I come up with the top of my head. And I work with the experts. I'm working right now, by the way, with experts at MIT on sharpening these and presenting these numbers. I mean, so I take this stuff very seriously, but why is two questions, the American press and the Democratic Party, why aren't they simply looking at the numbers? I'm not asking people to give me their opinion. I'm asking people to look at the numbers, which are clearly showing we had a Jim Crow election. Now, we've had them before, but like this stuff of the individual challenges we had. If you go again, go stream my film. By the way, it's a movie. I'm not asking you to do something terrible. Just watch a movie. Santita will tell you it's engaging. In fact, I remember
No,
Reverend.
We all love it.
Yeah, and so
Reverend has seen it twice.
I know. So in fact, I remember they wanted to take him out of there. He said, "No, I got to stay." So Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen, again narrated by Rosario Dawson. It's a movie. Go to gregpalast.com, GregPalast. You see it on your screen. gregpalast.com. Stream it for free. It's like I said, Jamie Foxx put up the money because he said, "This is my story." Even though he's from Texas. And one thing you'll find in there, by the way, this is a good one. Horrific. Rodney Ellis, who is the first black man elected commissioner of Harris County. Now, Harris County is Houston. And his plan during COVID actually was to send out ballots so people mail out ballots in Texas to the people of Houston. Now, many people do not realize that Houston has the largest black population of any city in America.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to send out 2.5 million ballots to the voters so they wouldn't have to wait in line and die during COVID. Ken Paxton, the Republican Attorney General of Texas, got on Steve Bannon's podcast and said, I stopped Houston from sending out those ballots. And if I had not stopped those ballots going out to voters, 2.5 million ballots, Trump would have lost Texas. Texas, Santita. Trump would have lost Texas. The Republicans themselves are admitting if they didn't use Jim Crow tactics, Trump would have lost Texas. And what else would he have lost? I mean, this is like, we have to understand we're not facing it, even though these guys are crowing about the fact that they use these tactics to win these elections, and we're doing nothing. And again, that's why I work with groups like Gerald Griggs, NAACP, why I work with C.K. Hoffler and the Rainbow Push, which is why I work with Barbara Arnwine, Transformative Justice Coalition, and the Hispanic group Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, and others, is because you can't rely on political parties to save your vote.
Say that one more time.
Yeah. The reason you can't rely on a political party to save your vote, because don't forget, the guys who are elected in our current political structure were elected by the current voter rolls. They were elected by this system. They don't want to change it because don't forget, if you change the system, you'd have different candidates. Bernie Sanders, if everyone got the vote, Bernie Sanders would have been the Democratic nominee in 2016. And I looked very carefully at for example, the vote in California, and
2020.
And 2020,
he was the strongest candidate in 2020.
He was the strongest candidate.
They pushed him out.
But what happened is the Democratic politicians today are elected by these Jim Crow voter rolls. They're elected by this Jim Crow system. So they would have to say, if we open up the voting system, they may give up their seats in primaries. So they're not necessarily against this system because it got them elected.
Yeah.
But we need to say to ourselves, 60 years after the Voting Rights Act of 65, it's been almost 6 decades.
Yeah.
When are we going to allow people of any color to vote in America and count their votes? And, let us remember, Santita, that no Southern state, none of these Jim Crow states that blocked African Americans from voting until the 65 Voting Rights Act. None of them said black people can't vote because that violates the 15th Amendment. It was always these obstacles, poll taxes, literacy tests, you name it. Well, this is just a new version of the poll tax and counting the number of jelly beans in a jar. Like General, my Major Turner said to me, why is this different? Why telling me I've been challenged by some guy who challenged 4,000 soldiers, a Republican Party official? Why is that different than telling me to count the number of jelly beans in a jar? So it goes back to the old Jim Crow, but it's now computer boosted. And that's the problem, is that it's not that they use computers to change the machinery and your vote count. They block you before you get a chance to count. They either take you off the voter rolls or they simply disqualify your ballot. And that's the new Jim Crow. But again, these numbers, if you go to, again, gregpalast.com and read the article Trump Lost, again, these are all based on government statistics. It's just hard numbers. There's no question about it. There's no question about millions purged. There's no question about a million challenges. No question about ballots being disqualified, provisional ballots being junked. This is all from the government stats, and it's not being reported. But worse is that it's not being acted on by the Democratic Party. But I'll say the grassroots groups are still out there. So please join in the activist groups. Look, we need a new voting rights movement. Otherwise, when Trump says we don't have to have any more elections, he's not talking about saying he's going to declare martial law and we won't have another vote. He doesn't have to. If these Jim Crow tactics continue, and of course under him, it's going to be made worse. We have zero protection from the Justice Department. They're on the wrong side.
I don't have.
How do we have?
No, Biden was president when this happened.
Yes.
Now, if he's going to be upset about losing the election and not happy because he's angry that he's not the guy at the top of the ticket, then he's going to fight for me. He didn't do that. He did not do that, Greg. Stop right here. Stop. And this is where this gets very real, because right now they have ICE raids all over the country. They're a little slow. It's like 1,000 people a day. At that rate, with 10 million people, it's going to take you 20 years to get this done. So you're not being serious, okay? Actually, it's going to take you 28 years. So you're not being serious, okay? But what you do, I'm watching DEIA. That's being thrown out the window. People are having their job offers rescinded. People are not getting their contracts. Up to 100,000 Black people alone who are high-ranking civil service employees, they're about to lose their jobs.
Yes.
Women are going to take a massive hit. You have the head of the Pentagon who doesn't even think women should be able to serve in the fields, when I've got a double amputee who's my senator, who's a woman, who's like, are you serious? What am I, chopped liver? What? And so I'm saying to you, this is a tremendous consequence. And they're not saying anything. I mean, come on, Greg. Well, they could have said something before January 20th.
It would have been nice. I mean, one of the problems I ran into is
it would have been necessary.
Well, when I was in federal court with C.K. Hoffler of Rainbow Push and Joe Griggs, NAACP, we didn't, where was the Democratic Party in the end? People keep asking me, and I don't know. I can't say. All I can tell you right now, if you're watching this, don't expect a political party to save your votes. But it would have been nice.
I've never heard you say this before. I've never heard you say this. I've
Yeah,
never
that's
heard you say this, but I
well, it's
know.
important because if you're waiting for the Democrats to save you or anyone else, any other party, forget it.
No.
You have to save your vote. You have to get on the front lines. You have to join up with Rainbow Push and NAACP, Georgia,
Black
all
voters
the
matter.
groups, Transformative Justice Coalition. There's so many great groups out there. Black Voters Matter, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright. These are great people. You want to sign, you got to work with them because it's your vote. It's not their vote. And that's really important. I mean, look, and in fact, they get annoyed. I mean, Al Gore is not he's not he's not a fan of mine. Let's put it this way. Even though I said you won, I will say John Kerry was grateful for my investigation. But here's the problem: we have to accept that we have apartheid elections in America, and we have
Mm.
to do something about it. And I also have other problems. I mean, why did the President of the United States and Merrick Garland wait 2 years before the appointment of a special counsel to investigate Trump? After this January 6th riots, why he should, the day he got into office, Biden should have said, I'm appointing a special counsel because I don't want to be politically involved in this. There would have been plenty of time to adjudicate these cases. And if Trump had been found guilty, he could not have run. And it's not about stopping Trump from running. It's about why was there such a delay in justice? I just heard one of the guards, one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Capitol Police, who was dragged out. They took his gun away from him. They were going to shoot him with his own gun. He had a heart attack. They beat the hell out of him. And the guys who beat him up, threatened him with his own gun, were going to kill him. He had a heart attack on the floor of the Capitol. Those guys were pardoned. Now, Mr. Biden, why did you wait 2 years to appoint a special counsel? So again, I'm not going to count on the politicians to save our votes, to save our country. We have to do it. Don't forget when Martin Luther King and your dad crossed that bridge at Selma. Hey, there was no Voting Rights Act. You have to take action on your own. You cannot wait for politicians to save you or complain that they aren't. It's our job. I don't know how else to do it. We have to get the word out. And I'd like people to go to gregpals.com, take that article, spread it around, send around the movie Vigilantes Inc. Just go to gregpals.com, stream it for free. So
Mhm.
I'm not asking a lot. I'm saying watch a movie, take some information, spread it around, take this podcast and make sure that other people grab it and that you get it around. We cannot do this without letting people know that the election was
Stolen.
shoplifted from them by ugly, ugly Jim Crow tactics.
Well, what we're going to do, Chaparral and I are going to turn this over to you so you can have this. You put it up on gregpalace.com.
Yes.
What we want to do is work out in the next few weeks you coming back to Chicago. We need to have you present this at Push on a Saturday morning and show the movie because this is not over.
No.
You have a lot of young people who are deeply disappointed with the Democratic Party and they're disaffected. And they're disaffected by the whole process because they feel like they have been misled, and they have been. And they also believe that no one is fighting for them. Number one, you have to let them know, no, you know what, you're not, you really, there is something here. And that we have to fight for ourselves because we are the ones who we're waiting on us to do this. You don't need to go to CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, all legacy media. You got Greg Palace right here. You can go to gregpalace.com. I'm going to give him this. You post this, go for it. But you got to come back here. And what we need to do is organize and get people and show because I think the film will mean something else to people now with this information. And
Well, yes, what I want to do is make sure that you protect your own vote, that we have to restart a new voting rights movement. The idea that because after Selma in 65 and we got the Voting Rights Act passed and we get Martin Luther King's birthday off and Obama was elected and everyone says, okay, well, that's enough. No, it isn't.
No, it doesn't.
It's gone backwards in the past 8 years. I'm telling you that right now. Seriously backwards. We are this whole business of a 1946 Ku Klux Klan plan of challenging voters. The fact that it's legal. Now, here's the weird thing, Santita. In 1946, Harry Truman said this was a violation of federal law and sent in the FBI to arrest the governor of Georgia for these mass challenges of black people. We had it in the past 2 years. I'm sorry, the Biden administration did nothing. Harry Truman did it, and he didn't have the Voting Rights Act to call on. Our Justice Department did nothing about this.
They would not
nothing.
even do an executive order on voting rights.
Yeah, and so
we
then
have to do this.
But we can complain, but we have to say, so what do? We have to inform people. We have to, basic things like we had billboards over in 2020. One of the only reasons Biden won is that not because of the Democratic Party in 2020 won Georgia and Wisconsin, but because groups, the on the ground groups, push Black Voters Matter, and the other groups, Transformative Justice Coalition, they took these issues on. We sent 80,000 postcards to purge people, tell them to re-register. A Latino group that we worked with had our numbers. They made 150,000 phone calls to Latino voters to get them to re-register who were purged. That type of action. It wasn't the Democratic Party. And so we have to be in charge of our own democracy and our own vote. We cannot rely on other people to do it. But we have to be informed. And we start out by, again, because my thing is numbers. You can go to my site, get at these numbers. And, when people don't believe it, say, here are the hard numbers. These are hard statistics. It's very important to understand that. And so we can do this because we've done it before. That is always 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. This is the backwards moment. But the pendulum of history will swing again. But when I remember when King said the arc of history will bend towards justice.
It's long.
But people forget the other part of his statement. It says it doesn't bend by itself. It doesn't bend by. You can't just wait for it to bend back towards justice. You have to bend it. And he said, interestingly, he had. I'll never forget this. Something very brilliant. King said. The enemy of justice is not injustice. The enemy of justice is complacency. So if we do nothing, injustice wins. The arc of history will bend towards justice when we bend it. And we can. We've done it again and again and again. And unfortunately, you got to do it again and again and again. Anyone who thinks that the voting rights movement is over, we've won. And so this idea that we cannot challenge an election because that undermines American democracy. No, it's the Jim Crow vote challengers. It's the people that purge your vote. They are the people who are attacking democracy, not the people who call it out.
I wasn't paying any attention to him because he didn't even fight for my vote here. No, and he still thought that he could win. Kamala won. She won with 107 days. And you all wouldn't even fight for her. And if you wouldn't fight for her, that meant you were not fighting for me. I got a problem with that. That having been said, what we can do, we have to fight and work as hard post-election now, Greg, as we were moving toward the election. So now we got to push your research and show people the film again because you have people's attention.
I'm hoping. Well, what I'm hoping is that people will say, I want to know what's going on. And I do worry about people who come up with this stuff like Elon Musk changing things from outer space. Look, it's good old Jim Crow. It's been around for a long time. This is why they do these things. The reason why the Brennan Center identified laws in 30 states making it harder for people of color to vote is because that's effective. and no one is defending these voters. And so we have to defend the voters who are being shafted. And
No,
when you,
when you shaft me, you're shafting. You have to talk about defending democracy. Talk about defending the republic. That's what this is about. Don't make it about me. This is
yeah,
about
well,
you. This is about
yes.
everybody.
Well, it's just like in Florida in 2000 when George Bush won the election by removing black people from the voter rolls.
Oh.
That took away my vote. That canceled my vote. It wasn't just the black people in Florida who lost their vote. I had my vote canceled by Jim Crow tactics. So you have to understand we are all affected by this. You know what? I'm not partisan. If the majority of people voted for Trump, okay, I'll accept that. But they did not. That's not what happened. And this is not conspiracy stuff. Again, I'm just working from government figures. United States Elections Assistance Commission, the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, Brennan Center for Justice. These are hard numbers, and you have to understand. Kamala Harris would have had another 3,565,000 votes if not for these ugly tactics. And we have to stop this vigilante vote challenge stuff that came out of the KKK the first time. It went national in 2024. If we don't turn it around, 2026 and 2028 are decided not by voters, but by vigilantes. Again, it's not that I'm vote Republican, vote Democrat, vote green or orange or blue. I don't care. What I care is that we shouldn't have Jim Crow determine our elections, but the voters. It's real simple. I mean, we either are committed to democracy or we aren't. And the Democratic Party's all worried, we'll look like election deniers, all this. Look, you're either for counting the votes or you're not for counting the votes. It's real simple.
Greg Palast, everybody. I can't say it more plainly, more brilliantly, more succinctly than that. Trump lost. Voter suppression won. Here are the numbers. Go to gregpalast.com. I'm going to turn this link over to him. Put it on gregpalast.com. Anything that any platform you're on, put it on your platform. You have my permission to use this. And we're going to circle back at Rainbow Push, and we got to get you back here. We're going to work with my morning stars. You all have heard it here. So what we need to do is get him back to Chicago, and we need to show this movie again. And no, we're the ones who have to put out these numbers. I can't wait on these other. We're the media. So let's put the numbers out there.
Yeah.
And if I'm on my way to Washington to speak for Dr. Jim Zogby. Democrats are dispirited. You won. But what you did not do was fight for those 3.5 million people who voted for you, who voted for you to work for them. You didn't defend them. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. The Republicans did their job. Democrats did not do theirs. That's a problem for me. And you all have to do right by me. And until you do right by me, as she said in The Color Purple, everything you do is going to crumble. You better do right by me. You need to do right by the people who have invested in you. Their last bit of hope they invested in you. Thank you, Greg, for all that you do and all that you have done. Thank you. And I'm so glad that your life was spared in California. Praise God. I'm glad you still have your home. And I'm glad that you're in Chicago, and I can't wait to be with you tomorrow.
Yes, I should say I lost my offices in ashes, but the home is fine.
You got your home, and
that's
more
all
than that, you've got
my life.
Thank you. And that for me is the thing, because I love my Greg Palast.
Thank you.
I love all of you, everybody, and I'm going to. With your permission, may I give everybody? May I put the?
Please.
Put this out now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I was holding on to it. So now I'm about to establish the link, you all, and pass it along. Sending you so much love, everybody. The Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. GregPalace.com, everybody. Check him out.